All right, we're going to talk about 2023, some things that I've seen, uh, changes in divorce law, some things you ought to know about. Now, Florida leads the way so far. Two major changes in Florida divorce law in 2023. The first is no more permanent alimony in Florida. Used to be you're in a long term marriage and you were slam dunk for permanent alimony for the rest of your life. They abolished that. They still have alimony, but it's different types of alimony, whether it's rehabilitative alimony to get your ex up on her feet or his feet, or bridge alimony so they can find a place to live, but no more permanent alimony, and that is a huge step in the right direction.
So
If you
permanent
really,
was until death then. So if he was paying alimony to her when he died, that's when it would stop.
if he was paying alimony to her and he died, if her lawyer was smart, they would have had him, uh, by court order, have a life insurance policy,
Right.
for $1 million at least. So
Yeah.
she would. So even if she put him into the grave and he had a heart attack and died, she's still going to get a payout in case he died quickly after the divorce.
Is
So,
this the doing of Governor DeSantis?
well, he has the final say. He could have vetoed it, but it's actually the Florida House of Representatives, and so somebody takes up this cause and says this is crazy. The constituents are saying, look, we're going to elect you, but we want you to champion this bill in the House of Representatives. So it makes its way all the way through the House. They voted in, and it's up to DeSantis to sign the bill or not. And he signed it. So it's a huge step in the right direction.
Good.
For ambitious people who may have made a mistake or got divorced through no fault of their own or choice, and they don't have to pay lifetime alimony anymore. So
yeah, it seems like such a bad deal. Like there's still quite a few states out there where you can get married and be married for the required period of time as a state outlines for lifetime alimony. It's like you're continuing to pay for a woman that you're not even intimate with or involved with or receiving any benefit from. It's completely absurd, because we have this like modern era of women and feminism, and I don't need no man. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, but she sure is happy as hell to take his, or reap the financial rewards for into perpetuity, really, right?
yeah, what I see a lot of is even someone that's in their 50s, let's say, and the wife she's bored, or she's attracted to the pool boy, and she might have an affair with him, or she might find somebody else that she wants to be with. No fault divorce, files for divorce, and then if it's a long-term marriage, she could get alimony for years.
Yeah.
And what if the husband in his 60s or 70s and he wants to retire, and he's got to pay this alimony? He's got to go back to court and convince a judge, look, I'm of retirement age. I can't keep paying her and live. So it's a mess. So I'm a big fan of what they did in Florida in terms of no more lifetime alimony. A lot of people, they'll parachute out of a marriage and maybe get millions of dollars in equitable distribution. Why do they even need alimony at that point?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me like the system needs to be changed. The whole marriage and alimony system is way out of whack, especially since there's a lot of women in the workplace who make a lot of money too. So
Is there a website that grades the states based on like father friendliness? I know that there's a national org of parents association or something like that. I had them on about a year and a half ago, and they grade it for like access to kids and child support fairness. But I haven't seen one that grades it overall, as far as like friendliness to men.
I don't know of a website that grades it. There's so many criteria. A lot of times it comes down to the specific judge. You could be in the same county and go across the hall to a different judge's courtroom, and they have a different view of what's fair. And the problem for a lot of people is judges' decisions in family court are subject to the abuse of discretion standard, which means that you have the burden to prove that the decision they made was they abused their discretion. Now, there's exceptions to that where the standard is did they go outside the bounds of the law? But if it's like a child custody decision or an alimony decision, you're going to have a hard time overturning it. You have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that, the decision was just way out of line. And that's hard to do. But I did see a website a long time ago where they tried to grade the states regarding men's rights with child custody. And that is a great segue into the next area of law that was changed very recently, again, in the state of Florida. The state of Florida passed their House Bill 1301. I have a copy of it here.
Here, so I've got his talking notes here, so I'm going to just hope that he gets back in time. But Florida's new child custody law defaults to 50-50 custody with a rebuttal presumption against it. It's a huge win for dads. The law was sponsored by a 40-year-old woman elected to the Florida House of Representatives, Jenna Parsons Mulikia. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong, but that's interesting that a woman tabled this law. But if you guys aren't familiar, default 50-50 custody is exceptionally rare. There's only a few places in the West where if you get divorced, it's presumed that the children or the child will be with both parents on a 50-50 schedule. The burden of the burden of proof then becomes on if a parent wants, and I might mess this up a little bit, and Jonathan will clarify, when he gets back in, but the parent that wants to be the primary caregiver, the custodial parent, basically has to prove that the other parent is essentially a piece of trash. They would have to prove something along the lines that they're a drug dealer, they're a criminal, they're a felon, they traffic, whatever, or maybe even prostitution, might be involved in something like that. But they would have to prove all of these things for the 50-50 to be set aside. Jonathan, sorry, man, we lost you. You froze. I don't know if that was your internet.
Yeah, I think just for a second, and I apologize for that. I'm not sure what you picked up in my absence.
You held up the piece of paper and then you froze from there. So
all right.
So I just went through your talking points and I sort of tried to explain what default shared 50-50 was.
Right. So I don't want to be redundant, but the special thing about this bill is it defaults to 50-50 as opposed to places like Pennsylvania where the law says gender shall not, it doesn't matter, should not be part of the decision. They take it a step further in Florida now, and they said it's default 50-50 with a rebuttable presumption that it shouldn't be 50-50. That is huge. So if you go to a website and you look at father-friendly jurisdictions, look at the law itself and read the law. Now, you might think to yourself, what could somebody argue where it wouldn't be 50-50? And one common thing is if the parents live too far apart from each other and the kid goes to a public school, most judges are not going to let the kid sit in too much windshield time. Like if it's an hour to drive them to school every day and back, especially if they're in grade school or middle school, that's a reason where you got to be careful. And it's not based on mileage. You could live in Hoboken, New Jersey, and try to get your kid to school in Manhattan. That's only a few miles apart, but they're going to look and see if it's in the best interest of the kid. But if you live in the same school district, and I know in many jurisdictions, Pennsylvania included, that the bus, if your kid goes to a public school and they take the bus, if you live in the same school district or a certain mileage from the school, the bus company has to pick the kid up from the other parent's house on the days that they have custody. So I tell my clients, give the bus company a copy of your custody schedule and let them know that on these days, you're going to pick up the kid from this house and on the other days from the other house.
Question for you, because I was talking about it a bit when your screen froze up. Would it be reasonable for a parent to argue to be the custodial parent or to be the sole caregiver in a state where it's default 50-50, like it is in Florida now? Prostitution, felony, drug dealer, like under what circumstances could a parent say that other parent is a piece of shit and they shouldn't, and we shouldn't have a shared 50-50 schedule aside from distance, with buses and stuff like that?
Right. That's a great question. All right. So it's not only the other parent's character, but it's the other parent's new paramour's character too, in places like Pennsylvania. So there's a list of enumerated offenses that you've either been charged with, if it's the charges are pending, or you've been convicted or pled guilty to. One big one is REAP, REAP, recklessly endangering another person. That's serious. Anything that has to do with child endangerment, that yeah, you got a huge uphill headwind climb to convince the court that you should have equally shared custody. You might even, depending upon what the crime was and how long ago, it's going to be tough. Anything that has to do with sexual assault, all right? Anything that has to do with domestic violence. That's why false domestic violence charges, you got to fight them. A lot of times people make false accusations, and that could affect your custody if you plead guilty or convicted. So any of those kind of violent, of course, homicide, murder in the first, second, or third degree, you have an uphill climb, but you'll still get some visitation, but there's going to have to be a third party there, usually without a criminal record, the third party. There are guys in prison where they'll take the kid on visitation day to see the parent. So you don't lose all custody and contact unless you don't have any interest. But if you got the right lawyer, you're going to have some contact, and that's physical custody. Legal custody, as it's defined in most jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, is the right to.
Oh, crap. Happened again.
Yeah, and that's almost always 50-50 in Pennsylvania, unless one person's incarcerated and they can't make those decisions because you can't get to them. So you should, if you're a parent and you want to be in your child's life and make those decisions, educational decisions, in places like Pennsylvania, they don't just give one parent carte blanche to make all those decisions. Other jurisdictions, they do.
I just want to emphasize the significance and the importance of a default 50-50 parenting plan if you have to untie the knot. Like, I have a friend, he's here right now, and I thought that he was recently divorced, right? Like, he's still fighting. And I said to him, it'll get better. And he looked at me with crazy eyes, like, what? Because it's been 9 years. He's been fighting for 9 years since his kid was basically a toddler with his ex-wife, over parenting schedules, custody arrangements, holidays, birthdays, Christmases, you name it, even to take a couple of days off to meet up with the boys and go for a road trip and just do something fun as a man. He's still fighting on this because in Ontario and Canada, you don't have a default 50-50 arrangement like you do in some states now introduced in Florida. It's my opinion and my recommendation to guys that if you are going to get married and tie a knot with somebody and have children, my recommendation is move to a state that is father friendly with a 50-50 default shared custody plan, because it removes one of the most contentious parts of divorce that I've seen happen to most guys in Ontario. That's where most of my friends live. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
I think it's a good idea. A lot of times people, though, are tethered. Like if you started a business that's location dependent,
Yeah,
it's big to pick up and move to a state where you don't know anybody and you don't have your support system. So now Florida just instituted this. Hopefully other states will pick up on it. I know that they looked at this in Pennsylvania about 10 years ago and it was shot down. And I disagree with shooting it down. Why? If this person was good enough for you to make a child with, why are they now not good enough for you to be half parent, have them half the time? Now, some jurisdictions, including Pennsylvania, have parent coordinators because the judges just can't take every single little fight that the parents have. So they'll appoint a parenting coordinator, and the parents pay this person by the hour. It's a licensed attorney that has training and experience in resolving these fights, because the courts have other things to do, not fight over whether little Johnny's getting pizza with pepperoni on it or not, and you can imagine, or maybe you can, like when people get angry and bitter, they put the kids in the middle, and it hurts the kids. It's crazy. People just can't get over being a co-parent. But hopefully your friend, after all these years, eventually the other side will just like either come to their senses or run out of gas or run out of money and say, this isn't working. Because as the kids get older, they're hip to this. They know what's going on, and they know the parents that's stirring the pot all the time. But people don't listen, and they'll burn the...
I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full-length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pin down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.